Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated in the seat. Make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated in the seat. There are no assigned seats. You can sit in any seat. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. You may be seated. You can sit in any seat. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Should be enough seats for everyone. Make yourself comfortable. There are no assigned seats. Sit where you want to sit. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody should have a seat. And I always tell the ladies and gentlemen, the jury, lawyers, and parties, you may be seated. That if you want to sit on this end, come out first. If you want to sit on this end, come out last. That way people don't have to crawl over you. But technically, there are no assigned seats. You can sit wherever you want to sit. And by this time, Deputy Moore should have given you a writing instrument and also a notepad. Those pads you can use at your discretion. You can write notes if you wish. Those notes will be used for your purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, we've completed the jury selection process. Next phase will be the opening statement, presentation of evidence, then come to closing arguments, charge, and deliberation. But before we may proceed, I must administer an oath to you. If I could have all of you stand, please. And let's see, and raise your right hands. I need one other person back there standing. Raise your right hand. You shall well and truly try to issue form upon a bill of indictment between the state of Georgia and Hemy Neuman, case number 11CR1364, who is charged with malice murder, possession of a firearm during commission of a felony, and a true verdict give according to the evidence. So help you God, if you will. Say, I will. All right, you may be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I will read the indictment to you. It's dated, well, it was returned by the January 2011 term grand jury, case number 11CR1364, State of Georgia versus Hemy Neuman. Count 1 charges and accuses Hemy Neuman with the offense of malice murder in violation of Official Code of Georgia 1653 subsection A for the accused person in the county of DeKalb, State of Georgia, on or about the 18th day of November 2010, did with malice aforethought cause the death of Rusty Sneiderman, a human being, by shooting said Rusty Sneiderman with a firearm. Contrary to the laws of said state, the good order, peace, dignity thereof, signed Robert James, District Attorney. Count 2 also charges and accuses Hemy Neuman with the offense of possession of a firearm during commission of a felony in violation of Official Code of Georgia 1611-106 for the said accused person in the county of DeKalb, State of Georgia, on or about the 18th day of November 2010, did unlawfully have on his person a pistol, a firearm, during the commission of a crime of murder, a crime involving the person of Rusty Sneiderman, contrary to the laws of said state, the good order, peace, dignity thereof, signed Robert D. James, District Attorney. To all of these charges, Mr. Neuman has entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. He is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty here in a court of law. Ladies and gentlemen, the next phase of the trial will become opening statements. Both the state and defense will have an opportunity to outline what they anticipate the evidence to show. Following the opening statements will come the presentation of evidence, and that's what you're going to base your decision upon. As I told you several times, evidence will come to you in the form of sworn testimony from this witness stand and any physical evidence that is introduced during the course of this trial and or any stipulations that are introduced. And I will give you the law that applies to this case at the conclusion of the trial. The state of Georgia will have an opportunity to go first because they have the burden of proving each and every material element beyond a reasonable doubt, followed by the defense. The state may proceed with its opening statement. You may. And also, lawyers, you can introduce the different people at your table so the jury know who's accompanying you during the course of the trial.
Thank you, Judge. My name is Don Geary, Chief Assistant District Attorney in DeKalb County. With me, my trial partner is the elected District Attorney Robert James, and Andy Pascal, one of our Assistant District Attorneys, will be assisting. The morning of November 18, 2010, started pretty much like any other morning. Rusty Sneiderman was taking his son Ian, his 2-year-old son, to the daycare. Ian was enjoying spending the time with his father and looking forward to playing with his friends at the daycare. Ian didn't know that very shortly his loving father, his buddy, his hero, would be savagely gunned down. Ian didn't know that he was about to see his father for the last time. Ian didn't know. And there were gunshots, and Ian's father was gone. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not the beginning of the story, nor is it the end. This is the case of the state of Georgia versus the defendant, Hemy Neuman. He's charged, as the court told you, with 2 counts. The murder of Rusty Sneiderman on November 18, 2010 in DeKalb County, Georgia. And he's charged with the possession of a firearm during the commission of that murder. Now, to that, the defendant has pled not guilty. He's also interjected an affirmative defense. He's raising the defense of insanity, that he did not know the difference between right and wrong at the time of the murder, and he's claiming, therefore, that he's not responsible for the murder. The affirmative defense means that the defendant is admitting to the murder. The issue before you is his sanity at the time of the murder. The trial has begun, and this is opening statement. Opening statement is where the parties get to tell you what the evidence is that you're about to hear. So here we go. The defendant was born in Mexico, raised in Mexico and around the Caribbean until he was about 13 years old. 13, he went to a private boarding school in Israel. Finished their equivalent of high school. Went to Georgia Tech. Received an aeronautical engineering degree with honors. Started working for General Dynamics as an engineer on the F-18 fighter. Did that for about 6 years. Worked for a few other companies. And in the interim, got a master's in business administration from Bradford University in Bradford, England. 1999, he started working for General Electric in Israel. 2006, GE transferred him here to Atlanta, where he's an operations and project manager. He will tell you at the time of the murder, he has stated at the time of the murder, that he is making approximately $180,000 a year salary, that he is managing over 5,000 engineers, and managing over an $800 million budget. In there, he had time to get married in the late 80s and have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, in the early 90s. 2010, Andrea Sneiderman was hired by GE. The defendant hired her, and he was her boss. Now, at that time, Andrea was the only income for the family. Rusty, her husband, a Harvard graduate, a financial planner, a wealth management specialist, CFO for major corporations, was at that time trying to start his own company and had no income. Andrea was earning the money for the family. They had a little girl, Sophia, and 2-year-old Ian. During that time, Andrea, for GE, was traveling. She was actually also traveling with the defendant most of the time. Andrea will tell you, you'll hear from her, that the defendant made a pass at her. She told him no. Andrea will tell you there was no affair. Defendant told others there was an affair. But then he decided to say that, well, maybe he was just hallucinating about the affair. During the summer of 2010, the defendant claims that he was visited by a 6-foot dark demon that looked or sounded like Barry White. That the demon told him to come to him. That he anticipated or believed that meant for him to kill himself. Thought about it, he tried it, but ultimately he didn't do it because he knew it was wrong. Also in the summer, he claims a 6-foot bright white angel came to him. Looks like, sounded like Olivia Newton-John. And the angel told him, he says, But Andrea's children are his children, even though he had a vasectomy years before the birth of either one of them. This smart, intelligent man claims he didn't question the angel, just took it verbatim that those kids were his. And said the angel told him he had to protect the children and he had to kill Rusty. So without questioning, this engineer set about figuring out how to kill Rusty, he says. The trips with Andrea were continuing. That was part of their job. And in September of 2010, the defendant decided that a gun would be the best method to kill Rusty. So he starts going to gun shows. He even took a gun safety course because he didn't want anybody to get hurt. He contacts gunlistings.com, a website that helps people sell their gun. And in that, he made contact with a gentleman by the name of Jan De Silva. Jan De Silva had a .40 caliber Bersa Thunder that he wanted to sell. Jan had bought the gun earlier that year in 2010. But Jan, a young man, now wanted to take skydiving lessons. So he needed to sell the gun. On October 31st, Halloween 2010, the defendant went to a gun show in Dalton, Georgia. Now at that time, actually on October 3rd, the defendant had left his home, left his family, moved into an extended stay. And about that time, the end of October, moved in with an elder friend in Buckhead. So he returns from the Dalton Gun Show back to Atlanta, proceeds down to Buckhead, meets Jan De Silva, and buys that .40 caliber Bersa Thunder in a parking lot. Jan gives him 2 boxes of ammunition. One of them are Winchester hollow points. What the defendant didn't know was that a Bersa comes with a shell casing that's called a test fire. A test fire is a shell casing the company gives the owner of the new gun to show them that their weapon works and it's been fired by that gun. Jan will tell you, it's kind of like a joke, he gave the shell casing to his girlfriend. The defendant didn't know she still had it. Next day, November 1st, the defendant goes to Pennell's gun range in Conyers. Not Conyers, he goes to Pennell's gun range and shoots his gun. Takes target practice. He's ready. He buys a disguise. The man who doesn't know right from wrong buys a disguise. And on November 10th, early morning, after Andrea has left with Sophie, approaches the Sneiderman residence. He's laying outside by the air conditioner, waiting for an opportunity to kill Rusty. What he didn't know that morning was that the Sneiderman's resident had a gas leak. And Rusty went out to check the gas leak. Rusty startled the defendant, who then, not knowing the difference between right and wrong, ran. He ran. Rusty called the police. The defendant's disguise had been seen. So he buys another one. This takes us to that morning, the morning when Ian lost his dad. The defendant, in a rented car, the day before, on the 17th, he took his car to Ed Boyd's for warranty work. And it went to Enterprise and rented a 2011 silver Kia Sedona van. 5:36 in the morning, completely out of character. The defendant goes to his work at GE. He uses his swipe card. They have little cards that when he runs it, it says, "I am Hemy Neuman. I'm authorized to be here." And he's permitted access. These are secure buildings. Swipes his way in. They're so secure, he goes to the elevator and has to swipe his way onto the elevator a minute later. So he's up at his office at 5:30 something. Turns on his computer. Does a few things. And without using the elevator, exits a back door. Now, security at GE, you'll hear from the director of security. It's pretty tight. There's cameras everywhere. You have to be someone who belongs there to be there. That's why there's a swipe on the elevator. The defendant used the stairs, didn't use the elevator, and went out an unmanned back door next to the parking garage. But there's a video camera, and it caught him going out that door at about 5:50 in the morning. About 5:52 or 3, the cameras in the employee parking garage, they caught the defendant coming in, and they caught him leaving in the silver Sedona Kia van. He leaves. He goes somewhere up near I-80, I-75 and Delk Road, presumably to put his disguise on. But he takes his cell phone. He's an engineer. He takes his cell phone and leaves it there for an alibi. Gets in his van and he heads to Duwnoody. 8 something, he's seen on video driving through the daycare parking lot. After that, he's seen driving in Magnet Court, the cul-de-sac where the Sneidermans live. A few minutes to 9 starts that fateful trip. Rusty puts 2-year-old Ian in the car. Daddy and son head to the daycare. Ian's looking forward to his day with his friends. Rusty's still trying to get his company off the ground. A couple of miles down the road, just a few, it's the daycare. They get there. Rusty takes Ian out of the car, takes him into the daycare. Duwnoody Prep School. Rusty kisses and says goodbye to Ian for the last time. He walks out. Laying in waiting is the defendant in his disguise, in his Kia van. As Rusty walks to his car, the defendant approaches him. Walking toward him, pulls his gun, and he shoots him 3 times. Here, here, and here. As Rusty falls in the parking lot that cold November morning, dying, the defendant's not satisfied. He walks up and at contact or near contact puts that .40 caliber hollow point to Rusty's neck, to his jugular, fires one last time. And then this man who didn't know the difference between right and wrong goes to his van and drives off quickly to be lost in morning rush hour traffic. There was a doctor right across the parking lot. You'll hear from him. He's a pediatrician. Someone grabbed him right away. He was right there. But he'll tell you Rusty's injuries were just too much. There was no way. He did what he could. The EMTs arrived. They knew what it was. A guide to the hospital. Rusty didn't make it. And his dad was gone. The defendant, a little less than 2 hours later, in the area of Delk Road, pulls his van into a gas station and tops it off. Takes it back to Enterprise, returns it. Walks across the street to Ed Boyle's and picks up his van. And he drives back to GE. He doesn't go directly to his office. He goes to another building. It's the 2018 building. It's the building Andrea works in. He has access with his swipe card. But he signs out a guest card so his name won't show up on the register, and enters the 2018 building. He proceeds to Andrea's office and takes her laptop computer. Exits the building and goes back to his building, the 4200 building, where he again signs out a guest card. Doesn't use his own. So his name's not on the electronic log. Enters the building. You even got video of him entering. Dressed the same as he arrived that morning. Dressed the same as he exited out the back door at 5:50. And he goes up to his office. He had had a meeting the morning of November 18th, but he moved it to the afternoon. You'll hear from people at GE. They'll tell you he conducted that meeting. That he seemed, other than saying he was distraught over the murder of Andrea's husband, that he was perfectly normal. You will hear from GE personnel that will tell you they noticed nothing different in him at all. He was an engineer. 2 + 2 was 4. You'll also hear from GE people that will tell you that his computer, his office computer, wasn't used that morning, nor was his desk phone. I told you they have good security. And that was highly unusual for him. The next day, November 19th, you will hear that Andrea's computer was accessed, her laptop that he had. It wasn't returned to Andrea until November 23rd. He went to the Shiva at the Sneiderman's house, the morning period, as a guest, and returned her computer. 2 days before that, on November 21st, he attended the funeral and actually threw dirt with others and family members on Rusty's grave. He was hiding in plain sight. That afternoon, Dr. Steve Dutton, then an assistant medical examiner with DeKalb County, performed an autopsy. The doctor found the obvious. Rusty died of the gunshot wounds. They recovered some of those .40 caliber hollow points. At the scene, Duwnoody Police Department recovered the shell casings ejected from that weapon. In December of 2010, law enforcement discovered the Kia van at a rental lot for Enterprise. Discovered that the defendant had rented it during that period. They called the defendant, who at that point in time was on vacation at the end of December with a daughter in Florida. Said they wanted to speak to him when he returned. He returned on January 4th. Police contacted him. He voluntarily went with them back to the police department at Duwnoody and gave a very long statement. He was very lucid. He was very logical. He denied he had done anything. At the end of the statement, however, he hadn't fooled Duwnoody Police Department. They arrested him. They took into possession, into evidence, the iPad and the iPhone the defendant had in his presence on him at the time. Right there at the police department. The investigation continued. In February, investigator Mark Potter with the DeKalb DA's office was combing the defendant's cell phone records. And he found Jan Da Silva. He went to talk to Jan, took a photo lineup, just like you see on TV, and an admonition form that says, look at this, pick one if you can, you'll have the form. And he put it on the trunk of a car outside Jan's work. Jan worked at the Buckhead Diner. He was a valet. Jan looked at the photo lineup and boom, number 4. You will see the photo lineup. You will see the picture of the defendant, that man, as number 4. Jan says, I sold him my gun. And that's when Jan also tells Investigator Potter, I think we have a shell casing from that gun. Because the gun was never found. Well, Jan said, well, the gun wasn't found. He told me what he did with it. Jan told Investigator Potter that the defendant came back sometime after he sold him the gun. So Jan didn't know about the murder, hadn't made a connection. And the defendant told him he was having an affair. And things got a little, and he had to pull the gun. And then he threw it in a lake. And then the man who didn't know right from wrong offered Jan Da Silva money to lie to the police about him buying that gun. Jan said, okay, I'll do it. But Jan didn't take his money. Jan didn't lie to the police. He took Investigator Potter and they actually recovered from Jan's girlfriend, Aurora. You'll hear from her. Recovered the shell casing. Scene shell casings that were left there at the scene of the murder. And that shell casing, recovered on February 22nd, 2011, were taken to a retired GBI ballistics expert. You'll hear from him. He's been around since almost the beginning of guns. He's tested everything. Put that shell casing in there and said they're an exact match. And what's funny is it's a very, very strange weapon. Bursa did something different that makes it even more unique. He's positive this casing and the casings from the scene were fired from the same weapon. The iPhone and the iPad were transferred to the GBI. The GBI at that time, their technology was not so good on Macintosh products. The FBI said they would assist. The FBI got the iPad and the iPhone. You'll hear from two FBI agents, a cell phone records analyst expert, and another who's an expert at telling you what's on the device, anything that was done on that device. Chad Fitzgerald will tell you that that phone called Jen DeSilva on October 31st. He'll tell you that that phone was left in the area of I-75 and Delk Road the morning of November 18th. It will tell you where that phone went and who that phone called during this whole period. David Fryman, another FBI agent, will tell you that he looked into the iPad. The iPad searched for psychiatric privilege. What a doctor can and can't say about what he told them. He searched a Zillow search for the value of his house and the value of the Sneiderman's house. He searched a Google map right down to the street corner. Duwnoody Prep School. He's an engineer. He was ready. He had his plan. All that was found. Again, defendant was arrested on January 4th, 2011. In May 2011, the defendant saw Dr. Thomas. Now, Dr. Thomas has not spoken to us. He won't. But you'll hear what he's got to say on the stand. He talked to the defendant. In June, Dr. Rand talked to the defendant. She won't talk to us either. She'll be on the stand. You'll hear what she has to say. In the beginning of September 2011, the defendant started talking to Dr. Flores and Dr. Marks. Now, they are the defendant's doctors in this case that made an evaluation. And they claim, almost a year after the event, that the defendant did not know the difference between right and wrong at the time of the murder, and that he's not responsible for the murder. They finished their evaluation in the end of September. But in the middle of September, they filed their defense. Not guilty by reason of insanity. You'll hear from both of those doctors. Then you'll hear from the state's folks. You'll hear from Dr. Brickhouse. Dr. Brickhouse is the mental health doctor at the DeKalb County Jail. He'll tell you that he did an in-processing of the defendant in January. Less than 2 months after the murder. That the defendant didn't mention hallucinations. Didn't mention a demon. Didn't mention an angel. And didn't claim 5 children. Claimed he had 3, which is what he has. In the end of September, when Dr. Flores and Dr. Marks finished their evaluation, the defendant put a sick call sheet in. I need to see Dr. Brickhouse. Dr. Brickhouse went to see him. Now, after those months, the defendant's having problems. He says, by caution, Dr. Brickhouse puts him on 3A, which is our mental health unit at the jail. Dr. Brickhouse has daily to weekly observations of the defendant from the middle of October to the middle of January 2012. Middle of January, the doctor puts him back in general population and says there's absolutely nothing wrong with this man. Absolutely nothing wrong with this man. Funny, when he talked to him in October and he was having problems, again, the defendant, who had asked Dr. Brickhouse, is this confidential? And the doctor told him it is, because at the time it was. When this defense is filed, all that goes away. But until this is filed, that privilege is in place. So he asked Dr. Brickhouse in January, is this privileged? He says yes. And again in October, when he tells him he's got problems, he doesn't say he's hallucinating. Doesn't talk about the demon. Doesn't talk about the angel. Doesn't say he has 5 children. When Dr. Marks and Dr. Flores talked to him, by the nature of their work, there's no privilege. What he tells them, they have to tell anybody that asks. That's the first time he told anybody that the demons told him to do things and the angels told him to do things. And the first time he ever indicated he's got 5 children, he thinks. Only when there's no privilege. You'll hear from Dr. Crawford, the state's expert, who did a full evaluation. She'll tell you a very poor job of faking mental illness. His conditions and his ailments don't even match. He picked some from here and some from there. Flores and Marks claim now even that he's bipolar. Crawford will tell you there's no evidence of that. Crawford will also tell you that this defense is a statutory defense that requires specific findings. She'll tell you, you can be what anybody else would call crazy. You can be what anybody else would call insane. But for legal insanity to not be responsible, you've got to meet requirements. And she'll tell you this defendant doesn't come close. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the state's case. Plain and simple. Boil it down to a sentence. A man wanted someone else's wife, so he killed her husband. He got caught, and all of a sudden he's insane. At the conclusion of the trial, the district attorney will give the closing argument for the state. He will ask you to return a verdict that speaks the truth. And after that evidence, he will ask you to convict this defendant on all counts. Thank you.